Good evening, and thank you all for joining this important forum on the future of our beloved Tribeca neighborhood. I'm Anthony Crowell, the Dean and President here at New York Law School, and we are a 130-year-old institution that has called Tribeca home for the past 60 years. And among my colleagues who are joining us today, I want to give a very warm welcome to our longtime board chair, Arthur Abbey, who is a 1959 graduate of the law school, and he's with us in the audience. And I just want to say at the outset that New York Law School is here to offer our convening power and resources in a moment of crisis. I've been dean now for 9 years, going on my 10th year. And I have always tried to ensure that NYLS gives back as much to the community as we take, including by hosting hundreds of free public programs through our substantial clinical and pro bono work, and by welcoming students and visitors who come to rely on the businesses in our neighborhood. Speaking for myself, I've worked in and around Tribeca for my entire career as a lawyer, 24 years, first as an assistant corporation counsel at the New York City Law Department at 100 Church, then as Mayor Bloomberg's counsel at City Hall for 11 years, where, among other things, I helped reduce the burden of the city's regulations on small businesses and did other economic development work citywide, and now for the past decade as the leader of this law school. Tribeca, for me, has been a second home. I often like to say that I live in Tribeca, but I sleep in Brooklyn. I probably spend 16 hours a day in Tribeca, and it's been that way since 1997. I feel such a deep connection to the extraordinary and special community we have here and we all value so much. And I've seen this community face difficult times before. We all remember back in 2001, that was such a terribly difficult time. Working at the law department right across from the Trade Center, we were displaced, as were so many. I was then deployed as counsel to the Family Assistance Center that the city directed, and I led the expedited death certificate program. And immediately after that, I came back and joined the Bloomberg administration. I saw Tribeca recover in the years that followed. I watched it grow from strength to strength. And although it is a destination for people around the world, it remains at its core the same welcoming and neighborly community I've known for a quarter century. As our law school has 1,100 students and several hundred staff and faculty who make full use of this neighborhood, I know that they spend much of their time walking around the neighborhood, enjoying all the offerings, and considering those who provide services to them part of their communities and families. Many students tell us that one of the reasons they come to New York Law School was that they wanted the chance to study law in the global epicenter of commerce, governance, and technology, but also they wanted a campus community at the same time that feels like it's in a small and friendly village. As we know, Tribeca offers both. The restaurants, the boutiques, the galleries, the wide range of personal care businesses, the schools, and the green spaces make it a wonderful place to live or work. Last spring, our law school became one of the first schools to be impacted by COVID-19 when one of our students had close contact with the second known infected patient in the state. And needless to say, this was quite disruptive and deeply painful, and we've been operating largely in a remote format since. While we reopened our physical campus to accommodate a small portion of our usual student body in the fall, we are planning to bring back a more fulsome return this fall. I've continued to come to the office throughout the past several months, and every time I come out of the Chambers Street subway stop, I'm pained to see how many businesses have closed shop and how empty the neighborhood now feels. And I know that many of you feel the same way. I've had the opportunity to speak to a good number of you, and that's what inspired me to write my letter to the Tribeca community earlier this month, published in the Tribeca Citizen, and it's why we're all gathered here tonight. Let me give special thanks to Pam Frederick, who runs the Tribeca Citizen. She, along with Carl Glassman, the editor of the Tribeca Tribune, play an essential role in keeping us all informed. That is a true service, especially in a time of crisis, and they are uniters, and we appreciate what they do. And while our neighborhood has many wonderful advocates like Pam and Carl, and I see so many of you here tonight, there's no formal organizing entity that exists to hear and prioritize the concerns of businesses and residents. Many other communities around the city have formal organizations that represent and promote their interests. And in my recent letter, I proposed that we form a Tribeca Pandemic Recovery Task Force to begin to fill this gap and to think about the way that we can be an additive force as the city starts its path to recovery. Leading up to this forum, we had many conversations with community leaders and stakeholders in the neighborhood, including the Tribeca Alliance, Friends of Finn Square, and Tribeca Trust. Also, we spoke to our local elected officials and Community Board 1, who's represented here tonight. And we also spoke to many others who live or work in the neighborhood. Tonight, you're going to hear some perspectives from speakers who represent a cross-section of business, government, and residents. We'll also have time for discussion with audience members, and we look forward to hearing your perspectives and your ideas. Let me just say that my goal for this program is for us to begin to identify concrete issue areas that our task force will pursue and determine what research and advocacy steps are needed next. After the program, I envision us accomplishing these goals through a set of issue-specific discussions. And we'll continue this important conversation with all of you going forward. Communication will be key, information will be key, and inclusion will be key. I'm eager to start working with everyone and to listen to everyone's thoughts and perspectives. As I said, I've been at the law school for almost 10 years and have worked in this area my entire career as a lawyer. The law school has a long history in the neighborhood. Not all of it has been wonderful, but this is the new New York Law School, and we seek to be a unifying force and to shape an even stronger community, and look forward to doing that with all of you. Now I want to welcome a 2012 graduate of the law school, Chris Bruno. Chris is an expert in small business and economic development. He's a senior fellow with New York Law School's Law and Leadership Institute, and he brings a decade of experience with him, experience that started in city government. So he'll share his expertise with us and help facilitate a conversation. And he will also moderate the audience participation portion of the event. I also want to welcome Brian Kozuba, who's a 2004 graduate of the law school. He's the Associate Director of our Center for New York City Law. His background is in government and community affairs, and he himself was a leader in his local community board in Bay Ridge. He will start tonight by introducing our panelists. Brian?
Thank you, Dean Crowell. Before I do that, I just want to go through how we're going to proceed. As you can see, the Q&A function is available. We don't have the chat function, but this is an open meeting. We want people to submit their questions. We are, when it gets time to it, Chris is going to be able to allow you to unmute to be able to ask your questions, because we want this, again, this to be participatory and hear your thoughts. But we want you to submit the questions, hopefully in advance in the Q&A function, because we know we're not going to be able to necessarily get to every single one of you. But by submitting the questions in writing, it'll provide a transcript that we will have, that we can share, that those on this call can look at going forward, and that anything that comes forward from this, we will make sure that your voices, concerns, ideas are taken to heart. So we want you that. We also want you to note that tonight's meeting is being recorded. So we have this again for our transcript purposes. Should we want to refer to it later, and use what came out of this hopefully very productive meeting to be able to formulate something going forward for Tribeca. With that, I'm going to introduce our panelists, and then quickly start this discussion. First, we have Lance Lappin from Lance Lappin Salon, who is also a resident here, a small business owner in Tribeca. We have Alice Blank, who's vice chair for Community Board 1, also resident Tribeca, and owns A Blank Architects firm. We have Regan Brown, who's project manager from the neighborhood planning team, New York City Small Business Services. We have Andrew Riggy from the New York City Hospitality Alliance. And quick congratulations to you, Andrew, on being named to Crane's 40 Under 40 today.
Thank you.
Later, we hope to be joined by James Famularo, who's president of the retail leasing at Meridian Capital Group. We have Andreas Koutsoudakas from Tribeca's Kitchen, who's also partner at KI Law Group. And we have David Steingard, owner of Laughing Man Cafe, resident, and also a 2004 NYLS graduate. And finally, Paul Mutter, who's head of global Fenix sales at BGC Partners, and formerly from Goldman Sachs, and a resident. So we thank you to the panel for being here tonight, for offering your diverse knowledge and understanding of the community. We look forward to hearing what you have to say going forward. So with that, we're going to start things off with a question, and we can start with you, Lance, but panel, please join in. So we're all here today because we agree that something has to be done to help Tribeca's recovery. And Lance, as a small business owner and a community stakeholder, what do you feel that the neighborhood is missing? Is it heightened engagement? Is it a more formal organizational framework? Is it advocacy leadership? What do you think we need going forward?
First, I'd like to thank Anthony and his team for organizing this meeting tonight, because I thought it was a good idea when Anthony approached me. There have been, and there are other groups, but I think what we need is something that could be organized, that we can all get involved in to help each other. The one thing that I've seen, like in my industry, when we first closed down, was that the pandemic brought the hairdressing community together with meetings that were from other salon owners that I never even met, I've heard about, but here we were doing these group chats, kind of like this, about our concerns. So the competition and everything was taken away, and we just kind of talked to each other about what we can do in this unprecedented, total uncertain time of who knows how to act during this. Like what I'm seeing from where I'm standing in my business is there's no office workers down here anymore. So there's no financial district. The city is coming back now, starting in May, with 80,000 people. So I'm hoping that brings it together. But the residential community, a lot of it is gone. And personally, I feel like I've lost half my business because there's nobody here. So what do you do when it starts coming back? Hopefully, are the rents going to go back up? So as a small business, I don't have the resources to brainstorm with people who would know how to deal with that in a really real-time fashion. So I'm grateful that this might be it. I don't usually do things like this personally, but I feel like it's like no other time in my life. I've been through September 11th. I've been here 36 years as a resident and a salon owner, servicing and taking care of this great community that I fell in love with. Andreas, like I know your dad. I remember when they built Greenwich, the buildings, and I was thinking like, oh, thank God, a building is coming down here. And then to meet Andy, it was like, yeah, how did I get so lucky to be part of this community? And to go through all of these other life experiences with all of these people that felt the same way. I felt like I you know, what did I do to have this karma come back to me in this community that it is like a little village. You know, it's a little village with like 3 or 4 main streets that, you know, can come together and really draw people down. Like people, it was unique. What happened after September 11th, the world saw this little neighborhood in the middle of Manhattan with a school with a bell that was, you know, rang at 8:30 or whatever. And they fell in love with it. So like, what little bell can we ring now that people will see like, oh yeah, this is a special place within a very special city. And from what I'm hearing, it's like the people need to come back to the offices. A lot of my clients don't want to get on the train. So how can we, you know, to make the train safer? And we got a lot of stuff to do to make people feel safe again, including myself. Like I'm aware, I'm not paranoid, but I'm aware of, you know, pay attention now. There's a lot going on the street, which is the only thing that's going on the street. So that's my little contribution.
Thank you. And I want to quickly just jump in. You know, anyone who starts asking questions in the chat function and the Q&A function, please make sure you state your name and affiliation so we know who you are and who you're representing. And it could be simply as, you know, a resident or, you know, concerned citizen, but we want to make sure we know we know who's here tonight. And we have a great turnout. We have over 100 people here in the room. So thank you all for coming. Chris, do you want to jump in and ask a question?
That's actually, you made some really sort of good points. And I'm just curious, you know, as you're talking to your fellow business owners and maybe people that are in your industry, but not in your industry, are you hearing the same kind of concerns? Are you hearing anything that jumps out from other businesses in terms of things that they need, that they're identifying as needs?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing from the people that I speak to. You know, friends of mine that live in the neighborhood, other businesses. I mean, this, yeah, it's just breaks my heart to see New York without people on the street. I love being that one little dot in the 8 million, 9 million dots running around the city. But Tribeca is, I feel, I'm sure Midtown is quiet compared to what it was, of course. But Tribeca being smaller, it's really quiet down here.
I'm wondering if Andrew, maybe you could comment a little bit on some of the stories you're hearing from across the city. And then I actually think Regan maybe could provide some insight as to what is happening with some other neighborhoods and some work that SBS is doing too.
Sure. Thanks everyone for having me. I mean, there's similar stories. They break your heart no matter what neighborhood in any borough. Businesses have been challenged, and you know, some a lot more so than others. I think services, whether you're a restaurant or a barber shop, it's been a really tough time. And then if you're located in a specific neighborhood that's being hit hard for many of the reasons, like Lance said, you know, you don't have office workers in their office buildings. If you have people that lived in the neighborhood, but they have second homes and they've left, you know, they're uniquely challenged. So I think when I think about these issues, it's about looking at it in 2 different time frames. One is from when the pandemic hit until when we will be back at some pre-pandemic normal. And what I mean by that is we have the same type of foot traffic. We have people back in office buildings. We have the tourists back. And what can we do to enact policies both locally at the state level and nationally to get the existing businesses from here to there? Because it would be an absolute shame if we continue to lose more small businesses and then in a year from now, and a year and a half from now, things start to normalize, meaning people are back in the area and those businesses that toughed it out for so long aren't able to make it to the recovery period. And then the second part is looking at what do you want your neighborhood to look like when it recovers? What do you want the retail mix to be? What do you want the feeling and vibe to be out on the street? And that's a whole other part of conversation maybe we'll get into later. But, you know, in short, the stories are heartbreaking. Small business owners, blood, sweat, and tears, invested their livelihoods in their business. There has been money through the Paycheck Protection Program. Not all businesses got it, but even that was far from enough to save these businesses. So many of them are really teetering on the edge of survival. And many reasons that they may only be in business still is because the state has a moratorium on commercial evictions, and the city has a law that suspends the enforcement of personal liability guarantees and leases. Without that, people haven't been able to pay their rent, and they probably would have been, evicted. So the stories are heartbreaking. They're very similar. They, of course, have their own unique narrative. But no matter if you're in Tribeca or you're out in Brooklyn, you're hearing, very, very similar stories, and it's unfortunate.
Regan, do you want to talk a little bit about what small business services can do?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Chris. Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name's Regan. I'm a project manager on the neighborhood planning team at the New York City Department of Small Business Services, also referred to as SBS. For those of you who are unfamiliar, SBS helps unlock economic potential and create economic security for New Yorkers by connecting them to good jobs, creating stronger businesses, and building thriving neighborhoods across the 5 boroughs. And just to dive a little deeper into that and my role specifically and what I can speak to, the Neighborhood Development Division, also known as NDD, which is the division that I work in. We work with community-based organizations to help neighborhoods grow and thrive. We do this by overseeing the largest network of business improvement districts in the country. We offer training, tools, one-on-one assistance to local community-based organizations. We also administer various grant programs to community organizations to strengthen and revitalize their commercial districts. With all that said, based on my personal experience in this role and what I've been seeing, I hear you all, and it's absolutely heartbreaking. This pandemic has been devastating to small businesses all across the city. From my personal experience in my work, I think organizing merchants is a really effective way to drive change. And for those of you who don't know or might not be familiar, merchants associations are run by a group of local merchants. And, that's important because everyone on the board and all of its members are invested in the neighborhood they're serving in one way or another. And, they really provide a collective voice for the neighborhood. And it's led by local stakeholders who are familiar with the neighborhood and can make key decisions about programs and services to drive positive change. But with all that said, I want to be cognizant or considerate of the fact that we are in a crisis at this moment. And, what SBS is doing or the programs I can speak to, we are offering COVID-19 resources and guidance for small businesses. We have the Division of Business Services has a business outreach team that will work one-on-one with businesses to help them with whatever needs or challenges they're facing. And we also have distributed, reopening guidance, restaurant reopening guidance. This is all on our website, but those are just some programs I can speak to directly that we're doing. But yeah, from my personal experience, I think organizing merchants is really effective and something worth discussing.
I would just add, and maybe one of the things, and Brian maybe touched on it, and Lance as well, someone said how the city's now going to be bringing back part of, the workforce. It would be interesting to know other companies that are in the area, what their plans are. I mean, the one thing that's been certain throughout the pandemic is that everything is so uncertain. So if there was a way to find out what companies employ a lot of people, what their plans are for bringing employees back, and what that's going to look like. Is it going to be, 2 days in the office at first, 3 days at home, some hybrid model? That may be able to allow some businesses that rely on those workers to start thinking, okay, if I can at least hold out till September, I know that there's going to be, 25,000 more employees coming back into the neighborhood. And then from there can start figuring out perhaps specific ways to market to those people. I mean, there's so much you can do with geofencing an area and doing direct digital marketing for everyone who's, posted "I love pizza" on Facebook to, start targeting them. And that's relatively inexpensive. So I think there's interesting ways, but my feedback would just be to try to give people information as much as possible so they can plan as best as possible, because the uncertainty makes it so difficult.
I think that's a really great idea, Andrew, because I try to do that behind the chair and ask all of my clients, hey, has your company started talking about when they're going to come back? Because that's what I'm kind of lunging towards a grappling hook to hold on to. Because you're right, what I'm hearing from other small businesses, the PPP money and the assistance is going to last so long. And then when that runs out, what's going to be the bridge to the next thing, to rebuild half of your business or whatever you got to rebuild. But that would be a great thing to know, that, because when I heard on the news this morning that the city, it felt like a little deeper inhale or exhale.
If I may jump in on it, I don't know if Chris, if you have a different sequence, but there's a lot of stuff going on, and we had great ideas that are being mentioned. I figured I'd jump in if that's okay. Please,
we want everyone jump in. Don't be shy.
Okay, great. So Andreas Koutsoutakis here. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the son of Andy Koutsoutakis, Andy Jr. here, proudly taking over Tribeca's kitchen. I'm in every single small business owner's shoes, with the exception that I also have a law degree, and I have a law firm representing restaurants, hundreds of them over the years. Greek, this is where I naturally stepped into from day one. And so I'm in a unique position where I see and help small business owners daily, but now I also had to deal with all of those problems myself. And I literally looked back last week, and every single thing that I do at my firm, I had to do for myself multiple times throughout the past year. And I'm blessed for that. I lost my father. Saturday is 1 year. It's been a crushing year for me. I can't even tell you. I'm seconds away from crying at any given time of the day still. I haven't had a minute to breathe, but I still had to somehow find a way to keep this thing going. And I did it for a lot of reasons. And again, I'm saying these things for a purpose in the end of it. I did it personally for my father, but I also did it because I wanted to show my clients who are wearing exactly the same shoes, this is what I did, right? And we have a conversation. How are you handling this? How are you handling this? So a lot of people in this on the panel had mentioned, Lance, you said it, speaking with one another. Tribeca has always been an amazing community. Just coming onto the panel, how many of you said, I knew your dad from here and from there? My dad's been through 9/11, through Sandy, and through everything else that's happened over the years. He doubled down, kept on growing. But 10 years later, rent becomes impossible. So part of the conversation here has to be, how do we get through this? How do we get to the other side? What do we do when we're there to actually be, version 2, right? And part of that is professionals and industry education. So if I know something about restaurant law, I should contribute that in some efficient way to the restaurants in the community. If it applies to other businesses, I should share it with them too. If an accounting firm has some information, do it. And it shouldn't just be a snippet that leads to a call so that you get a new client. Maybe they will be a client, but if we don't set these businesses up for success long-term, they're just not going to be good and healthy businesses, right? And so a big part of what's happened over this past year, and I knew right away, it was like a moment where I wanted to just kind of pause the past and create a new fresh start, both operationally and for the community, right? Changing the colors to more brighter colors. These are all things small business owners think about. And we also have to think about the community. I this year just kind of put everything into perspective. I remembered being 17, driving aimlessly on the crossroads on 9/11, and John Lennon's Imagine song came on, and here we are how many years later, and those words still matter, right? And it's as if nothing has happened. All of these years forget from 9/11 on, right? The words mean the same today. So did we not learn anything over the past 50, 60 years? And I think in many ways we have not learned anything in over these years. So what are we going to do differently this time around? And I think everybody has to stop thinking about my problem and maybe do the reverse. Think about other people's problems and let somebody else think about yours, and little by little it'll get fixed. So for me, I'm here. I do it in whatever capacity I can. Andrew, people like you and a lot of other people here, your existence is to educate and to advocate. And as a lawyer, it's our responsibility to do so, right? You got to represent your clients when they're paying you and when they're not. And that's my rule. And that involves two things: industry advocacy and education. So to the extent that I can contribute to that, I will. And it doesn't have to be restaurants only. If there's, a group in the community that really doesn't know something, I mean, there should be a place where, hey, does anybody know how to do this, right? We can figure it out, right? There's a lot of people in a lot of different places where we open our eyes and we stop thinking about my problems only, think about everybody else's also. And little by little, it's going to be the Tribeca that it once was. We connect. I will say it's really important. It's really important to just kind of reconnect from a human level. A month before the pandemic happened, before my dad died, Andrew, we were in the Step City Hall proposing the legislation on the Grubhub fees. And it was this years-long battle about the cap on the fees. And a month later, obviously, my dad passed and the pandemic happened, and it was successful, and they got actually half of what they wanted. But now the world shut off, and there was all this conversation about delivery only. Oh, we're never going to go out again. That's horrible. There is no community if we don't talk, which is why Zoom exploded, right? People need to see each other during all of this. We need that human connection. We need to know that someone else is thinking about me. We're not alone. Someone else they're staying up at night worrying about this sector of the community and that small business owner down the block that they've never visited, but they know about, or whatever it is. We just got to think about our neighbors more. And the fact that we don't have that many skyscrapers as other areas of the city should help us be able to do that, right? We can see pretty much what's happening around us. So I'm here to contribute, to hopefully unite, maybe change a little of the perspective of, we hear small businesses are suffering. There's other people that are lonely. There was a couple that has known me since I was 5 years old. And, I saw them walking outside of Tribeca's kitchen this morning, because I go every morning, and I know this man. He'd come when I set up during the closure. I set up my office in the restaurant so I could see the customers, and we had spoken. And I saw his face this morning. He was so down. He's an older man, with his wife. And I just went outside. I said hello, and I tell all of my staff and team members, just wave. I don't care if they have no clue who you are. They think you're weird that you said hello. Say hello more. Do these things. So I did. I brought them in. I bought them coffee and a croissant, and they saw a change in Tribeca. And I saw in their face that, oh my God, like when they were walking, Tribeca's kitchen, you changed everything, that look, right? You know my story. I say it as often as I can because I have a really important story to tell that I think is a good one for the world in general. And I brought them in and I bought them coffee, and we just chatted. I sat with them 6 feet apart, of course, masks, all of that. I showed them around the store. I told them what we're doing here. And, they were so happy to just connect, right? And so just to close off my rant, because I got a lot of emotions and I could go on forever. You never know what's behind someone's eyes. And that's a quote from a Greek song that my dad, we always used to talk about these old Greek songs, just like, Imagine, right? There's Greek songs like that too. So this is across the globe. And what that means to me, and what it should mean to everybody, is you don't know what's going on in someone's life. You have no clue why they're always angry, why they never say hello, why they're always blocked, why they only think about them. Whatever the reason is, you don't know. And it's not our job to judge. Our job is to be a community and help each other wherever we can, as little or as much as a leader or as a participant, support. That's what's going to bring Tribeca back, period. Nothing else.
Thank you, Andy. That's great. I know you're so passionate about this, and we appreciate your longstanding service and obviously the loss that you've had and the community has had. So I think we want to move to, James, I think we want to get your perspective, real quick, from the commercial real estate, what you're seeing, being someone who's worked downtown, has had dealings downtown. What are you hearing from your clients, from businesses, and what they need and what's happening?
Hi, James Famularo from Meridian. Thanks for having me. So what am I seeing? I'm seeing catastrophic losses and closures on every single block. I work with many small businesses, from dry cleaners to nail salons to boutiques, but probably the majority of the clients I work with are restaurateurs. And this has been a catastrophic event, and I think on average the city normally has 8,000 to 9,000 vacancies. In my latest round, I noted 51,000 vacancies from 97th Street to South Street Seaport. So it's horrendous. We're doing a lot of deals with the few landlords that are being cooperative and giving deep discounts, but we're still having quite a few challenges when it comes to the community boards. I think common sense would think that most of the community boards would be a lot more cooperative and a lot more appeasing with the liquor licenses, but we're not finding that. We're finding, most of the community boards see that the stores have become vacant, and there's no grandfather rule. They're just, all right, that store will stay vacant. And it seems to me, from my many Zoom call meetings, that the community board members would prefer them all to stay closed. Well, I think we know that most people, they want the stores rented. The construction workers want work to build out the stores. The landlords obviously want the stores rented so they can pay the taxes and the mortgages. And obviously we want to create jobs for everyone. So if there's any way that we can kind of streamline the community board process and maybe make it a little easier for people to get their liquor licenses, I think that would be a huge help. Same goes with the Department of Buildings and the Landmarks Commission. If we could streamline the process to get a permit, that would be a huge help. If we could streamline the process to get approvals from landmarks for new facades or new signs outside, I think that would be a big help. It's all about incentives nowadays. If somebody is going to take a chance in this environment and gamble, when the New York is going to come back, they're going to need incentives, and I'm seeing that across all the deals that we're doing.
Let's get Alice's comment and perspective, being the CV1 rep, the vice chair, and the Tribeca resident, to comment on James' comments, and then go pitch to David, who can comment from the same sort of line of questioning from a small business owner and local resident. So Alice, you want to?
I would say that our I'm getting a lot of text here in reaction to James's comments. I think that in fact, our board, this is Community Board 1, of course, has really been inundated with the tragedy, of course, and has responded, I would think, quite fairly, in fact, and I would hope effectively, by setting up, in fact, a small business working group to identify the problems and attempt to help solve them. So in terms of licensing, I don't have the same perspective that you're showing. I think that, in fact, our board has been quite sensitive to all the issues that surround us concerning the small businesses and restaurants and the needs to open, and the many regulations about open space that we review in terms of our, transportation and licensing, and attempt to be really pro business. So I'm, I don't sense it the way it's being described. Anyway,
I should note that I haven't had a bad experience in recent months with Community Board 1. Mostly it's been in CB2 and CB3, a little bit in
Okay.
CB4. So.
All right. You know, I don't know if there's an opportunity to speak later, but there are many issues, of course, this community in Tribeca is looking at beyond the issues of the business community that we grapple with, which, you know, we could talk about at some other point, but
Sure,
yeah.
I mean, Alice, if you want to keep going, then you please.
Well, these are sort of off topic because I see now that this is, you know, it's a little, I better understand the theme here, but I do want to point out the significance of the community board now that it's been uttered, and we have Brian there as a member as well. You know, we have 11 committees on our board that deal with all the issues affecting our community, including, you know, quality of life and transportation, licensing and land use and economic development and education and waterfront and parks and environmental protection. And the community would greatly benefit from much more participation of Tribeca residents and business owners and students. So in a way, I'm using this as a platform as a call to arms that people do come out to the board and participate in these meetings, because this is where a lot of work gets done. And we do have a kind of conduit to electeds that allows us to sometimes even make a difference, albeit in our advisory capacity. And I would say that, you know, just looking ahead, you know, Dean Crowell, looking ahead at the issues that you know, would like to see identified, I really do want to make sure that we don't overlook some of the critical issues that we have. And, you know, one of them is, you know, looking at the realities of this community's relationship to climate change, and specifically the Lower Manhattan Coastal Resiliency Plans. And the city is spending around $10 million on these plans, yet Tribeca, which lies in one of the city's most vulnerable areas in the floodplain, is not included. And, you know, these are areas that we really need to get behind and really look at very, very carefully. And they certainly affect the business community tremendously. And in some ways, even offer opportunities to the business structure, to the business community. I mean, you know, the supportive, interesting infrastructure projects that have come up, and you know, greening our open spaces, and the support of private-public partnerships. How do we really manifest that in an effective way? So there's just a lot of there are a lot of issues, and you know, that I hope this coming together of groups, differing groups, can really grapple with. That are very far-reaching and very critical to Tribeca. I'll leave it at that for now.
And I just want to acknowledge, I agree with you that there is a whole component of our work that needs to focus on these very long-term issues of sustainability, resiliency. No set of plans would be complete without really thinking very, you know, strategically and being very thoughtful about how that gets integrated. And I agree that Tribeca has not been as engaged on those kinds of issues as this opportunity presents it. So thanks for raising the issues. Appreciate it.
I want David to jump in, and again, you know, not necessarily we're presenting a particular theme. You know, we obviously, again, this is an open meeting which we want to bring in, you know, all sorts of ideas and comments and thoughts on how the community can move forward. You know, and David, I think you're a great, you know, voice to that. Again, being a lifelong resident, going to school at New York Law School, and now a successful small business owner can kind of speak to, you know, James' point about, you know, working maybe with the community board, working and seeing the changes as a resident, seeing the changes as a community, and get your, you know, vast perspective on that.
Yeah, well, Greg, I mean, the conversation's fantastic so far, and I think I hear a couple of different themes. You know, there's how does any small business do a better job at doing business? How do they market? There's that. There's how do we deal with government, you know, regulations? Obviously, running a business in the city is, you know, one of the most difficult places to do it. But just taking a step back and looking at the broader theme, and I'm hoping, you know, out of tragedy arises a little hope. And I think one of the things that's coming out of this is people are seeing that small business is essential to the fabric of any community. And I think it's sort of, we have shop local, we have this, but, we go back to Andreas' story with his father and Lance's, community at the salon. It's phenomenal to be able to sit on the stoop of a coffee shop, in my case, and meet strangers like you would, like I imagine an old town, Southern, small town. I mean, it's phenomenal. And I don't know where else that happens, only because I'm in Tribeca all the time. I'm sure it does, but it's one of the most beautiful things, right? And I think what's coming out of this is a real appreciation that small business, the characters involved in small business define a neighborhood, more so than we really give it credit for. And so the communication that everybody's spoken about, and so the next question is, okay, putting aside all the things that we need to figure out how to handle, the policy and all that, how does a neighborhood, and we're talking about Tribeca in this particular case, come together and create a cohesive vision? And there's many more questions than answers, but I think what we're touching on right now, if we go back to the exchange between James and Alice, which I think is highlighted, is what is the vision? How does a small business like me understand how they can navigate in Tribeca? What does the community want? I'll give you an example. The outdoor seating, right, in Tribeca was a hot button issue for a while, right? I was in the middle of it for a while. And that's fair enough. There's no praise or blame. I love a neighborhood where you have outdoor seating and you walk around and there's vitality and people are sitting on the street. I like that. I don't blame anybody who doesn't like that. That's a policy choice, right? So that's a conversation that has to be had. Now that our hand has sort of been forced into it, I've had people come up to me and be like, you know what, I get it. And I love it. And this kind of thing. So I think, I'd like to know as a community business, and I think it comes from better communication on both sides, what is the playing field? What is the vision we want for Tribeca? And it's going to be different for Park Slope. It's going to be different from the Upper East Side, So I think to Alice's point and James's point, I think there's a real opportunity now, given that this has touched all our hearts. We understand really what a neighborhood is like. People have mentioned 9/11, this kind of thing. How do we come together, take a fresh beat and say, how do we communicate better? How do we share information better? I'm on another group, deals with the restaurant industry. And it's the same thing. It's a WhatsApp group and they share information all the time. And I've heard so many heartwarming stories where people say, we've gone from this very competitive outlook where New York restaurants don't share any information to, does anybody have a plumber? Does anybody know how to deal with the PPP stuff? Does anybody, they'll say, listen, somebody just came around my shop in the city, just fined me for XYZ. Just even that kind of communication. So again, I don't have the answer. And I think the value of this is to bring up more questions than answers at this point. But there's a real nice moment for Tribeca right now to come together and think about how we want to come out of this, what our values are, how all the different alliances from Tribeca Alliance to Tribeca Trust can work together to create a cohesive vision. So we know how to do business together. And I think that's been a point where a lot of good-hearted and reasonable competing interests have not found a way to really unify. And I think there's definitely a way forward. I think Tribeca has done, for the most part, an excellent job at keeping its heart, right? I grew up here, been here 40 years, right? There was no supermarket. Washington Market was a sand pit with a weird fire engine sculpture. I broke many windows on the block playing stickball. It was like this organic frontier. And I think there's an opportunity to have that happen again with that sort of creative vitality that is a hallmark of Tribeca. So I see a lot of hope. I don't deny the tragedy. Absolutely. My business is suffering. They all are. So I can't add much to that story. but I think there's a great moment of hope for Tribeca.
David, I think you raised some really good points, and they tie back to what Andrew was saying about also protecting the existing businesses and really identifying what the neighborhood should look like. So to me, this is boiling down to how do we figure out and zero in on a vision. I think it's particularly important to make sure that the vision is inclusive of all perspectives. And I think, we can't forget the resident perspective as well. And Paul, I think you're a resident, and I'm wondering if you could chime in and talk a little bit about your perspective as a resident, but also maybe as your perspective as someone who works in financial services as well.
Thanks very much, Chris, and I'd be happy to. I'm humbled to be part of this group tonight. I'm actually if anybody needs an uplifting moment, I think they would be part of tonight's call, because it really shows the passion that people have for Tribeca and the desire to come together. Look, I mean, I'm a 15-year resident of Tribeca and 35-year resident of New York City and a member of the financial working community in downtown Manhattan, right? And I am here solely because I have an interest in the community, and I reached out as a member of my condo association, and we sent a letter to the law school, and lo and behold, we uncovered the fact that Dean Crowell and his team were interested in the community, and we quickly found ourselves engaged in tonight's discussion. And my personal passion is green streets, and so I'm a member of the board of Finn Square, and I am interested every day in ways we can beautify and maintain more green space for Tribeca. So that's my personal passion. One of the things that I quickly did when I started a dialogue with Dean Crowell was, what are we doing with the businesses in the community, right? I am an alum of Goldman Sachs. So we did a conference call last week with Goldman. I engaged the Urban Investment Group, but of course, Tribeca is more of a wealthy community, broadly speaking, right? So that's not a natural fit. And then we were engaged with the Charitable Foundation. And I think my main takeaway is that there is a huge resource for us, be it with Goldman Sachs, with Citibank, with all of these financial institutions and larger corporations in the neighborhood who actually are stakeholders in Tribeca. And of course, they're engaged with, CB1 or Downtown Alliance or Hudson River Park Trust. But, what strikes me, and I think there are a number of groups in Tribeca, but I think I'm sensing that there might be a unique opportunity here for us to leverage the DNA of the law school and Dean Crowell and, frankly, that academic perspective, right? Where we have all these different interests, and maybe we could gather and use that as our harnessing point to come together. Because I don't think there's a Tribeca specific institution that has that weight and that, ability to get us all together in the same room. Be it, I sense tonight maybe there was a little bit of a business friendly kind of thing, and I don't know. I'd hope that it's broader than that, right? Because long before the pandemic came along, and the trend post pandemic, right, post 9/11 was really the gentrification of Tribeca and small businesses not being able to afford the rent. So in sum, I think maybe that a great takeaway would be that there is a room for yet another groups, what this group becomes that represents Tribeca, that actually is looking out for the community, not business, not, another thing, not a political body, the community, what that takes. And I would personally look to engage the corporate interests. And I've told Dean Crowell that I would be happy to lead that charge, and that's where I think there's an opportunity.
I could jump in on that. I'm 100% behind you, and it's exactly what I was saying before, which is everyone should contribute in some capacity to everyone's continued success, personally as a resident or as a business owner, whatever you are. And it may be money for some organizations, or a service for someone else, or a couple hours here and there at a senior center or somewhere else. Whatever you could do, you should contribute. I think that is exactly also the problem, right? So, I know personally I've had problems with the condo board, and it's public. Everyone knows that there's a couple of things that have happened, and it's a traditional condo board versus small business owner. It is super important. And I know my dad, he always, he wanted to just extend his love to everybody and be very nice. But it was always this perception that, well, I live here, and so you need to do what I say. But actually, my dad put his life savings and another 10 into that business, right? So that was home for him, and he treated it and operated as such. And I'm going to do the same thing. So it absolutely should be taken into account, the residents, but it's a big correction needs to be made that just because you own a place here doesn't mean that the business owner is less worthy, and vice versa. Just because this is your business, that all of a sudden you can step on the residents. We do need to coexist, and in fact, one doesn't exist without the other. The $3 million apartment above me is not worth $3 million if, you know, Tribeca's Kitchen and Laughing Man and all these other places are gone, right? There's no community that would drive you here, and vice versa. So there's no one to serve if there aren't people that are working here and living here, and there's no community for me to operate in. So it's 100% a mutual pain for both people. They're just different, and we have to account for all of them. So thank you, Dean Crowell, and everyone else who participated. I'm all in, Paul, with you, what you described, and everyone else I'm in.
One of the things, if I can just jump in, I think it's important here, and it kind of cuts through a lot of the people's comments, is one, you know, everyone understands, and I think this pandemic has allowed everyone to understand the importance of small business. It's not only the economic impact, but also the social and cultural impact of neighborhoods. They make them what they are. And when you have shuttered small businesses and, you know, vacant storefronts, you have dirty streets and you have other types of activity that happens on those blocks that you probably don't want in your neighborhood. So to keep neighborhoods lively and interactive and have eyes on the street, you need those small businesses. And I've thought from the beginning, as tough as it's been, and it's been extraordinarily tough for restaurants and bars, you know, eating, drinking, socializing, that's just in our human DNA, and it's in the DNA of cities. And when everyone is comfortable to go out and eat and drink, I mean, I think people are going to want to do that more than ever. People are like, it's going to be a restaurant renaissance or a roaring 20s because we can finally go and see our friends and family and party, and it's going to be this great time. So I think with time, eating, drinking comes back. With the open restaurants program being made permanent, it'll be different than the current structure. I think that's a way that is going to reimagine and re-enliven your street activity, and I think beautify the streets even further. And maybe James is a good guy to speak with about this, because even pre-pandemic, regular retail stores were feeling it for various reasons, one of which online shopping. And the pandemic has clearly exacerbated how much people purchase stuff online, particularly a lot of things that they may actually have gone to pre-pandemic to the store to pick up. You know, even grocery stores. I mean, I'm speaking with people and they're like, oh, you know, my parents used to still go to the grocery store and they finally learned how to use Fresh Direct. Or are they going to convert back to going to the grocery store? So like, what kind of retail stores outside of food and beverage activity does the Tribeca neighborhood want? And how do you get those types of businesses into the vacant storefronts for rents that they can afford? And then how do you get people that live in the neighborhood and visitors to actually go there and purchase stuff? Because it's very easy to say, oh, if there was a great, you know, shop to go buy sneakers down the block, I would go there and buy them. But human behavior is such that it's like, oh, it may just be more convenient for me to order 3 different pairs of shoes from Zappos, try them all on, return the 2 that I don't like. So I think it really needs to be thought about, what kind of businesses do you want in the community? How do you attract them? And then what is that community going to do to ensure that they're going to have enough business to stick around?
Thank you, Andrew. I think that's a good segue to talk to the community now. You know, we've had a chance to talk, and I thank you for so many people to, again, come out tonight, and the general audience to still be here. We've had plenty of questions in the Q&A. Again, we're going to try to get to, you know, as many as we can, but all of these questions will be looked at. The panelists will see them all, we see them all, and anything that we, you know, next steps, we will take all these comments to heart. So, you know, Chris, I turn it back to you to introduce, you know, a few people to ask some questions from the audience.
And Brian, I've taken the opportunity to respond to some of those who ask questions, and I'm taking notes as well, so we can ensure that everything is integrated for whatever next steps we all take together. Very thoughtful commentary.
Chris, before you jump into that, I got to jump into another meeting, but I just wanted to suggest I see other communities in other states try to revitalize, and some of them consider maybe closing off a block that has quite a few restaurants, and then maybe make a few days a week, maybe an open air, restaurants, kind of like, for a limited number of hours. In some other areas, I remember going to Florida, in Hollywood, there's like a nightclub district. It's kind of like New Orleans, where you can go in one restaurant and have something to eat and take the drink across the street to another venue and watch. Maybe there's a commercial area that it's not going to interrupt people and bother them if it's not close to residents, and you guys would consider like a club or a party zone. That's just a few thoughts I had. I'm happy to help. Please keep me on this email chain. I'd be willing to help any way I can.
Thank you very much, James. That's Young Circle in Hollywood, Florida, and it's fantastic, by the way. So I actually want to invite people to actually come up to the microphone and ask their question. And I think if we're ready, I think Kathleen had a question. And Kathleen, you should be able to ask your question to the panel. Before you ask your question, I actually do want to ask the panel to kind of keep in mind, as we're taking questions from the individual audience members, if you could ask a big picture about how we start forming the actual framework to start responding to these questions. And I would be very interested to hear the perspective of the panel at some point throughout these questions on that topic as well. But Kathleen, if you're here, if you could ask your question.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Ken.
Okay, so hi everyone. I'm Kathleen Pettit. I work for Hersha Hospitality. We have 19 hotels in New York, and one of our great properties is the Hilton Garden Inn Tribeca. We do a lot of business with the community, a lot of business with the law school, and several businesses surrounding the hotel. And my question is, how can we come together as a strong community to drive lots of things? Like this call, I think, is critical of bringing everybody together, both community and businesses. I'm a part of a lot of alliances over the years in different areas in New York City, and they do a lot to drive tourism, which helps the restaurants, the businesses, the hotels. And I think this group here is really powerful. And if we all come together, I think there's a lot of different ideas we can bring to the table to drive so many ideas to make Tribeca stand out more than it is today, not only with the green streets, but with tourism and really putting Tribeca on the map internationally, domestically, like I've seen in other neighborhoods. As an example, like the South Street Seaport has come a long way with the Downtown Alliance. I think that Tribeca has a good foot to stand on to really empower and help grow and be noticed. So hoping that we can continue to speak, and I would love to be part of a task force to help us get to the next level.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Actually, Andrew and Regan, I'm wondering if we could hear your perspectives on both of those.
Yeah, absolutely. Kathleen, first of all, thank you for your question. I think you raise a really important point, and I think you're speaking to building momentum. And I think in order to build momentum, you need to meet regularly. And so I guess my advice is that someone on the task force takes the lead on scheduling those reoccurring meetings, and through those meetings, identify and solidify your shared vision, and take the steps to make that vision come to life. And depending on how the task force unfolds or proceeds, we, SBS, we're happy to provide technical assistance or share information and advice as your efforts evolve, especially as it relates to merchant organizing or building that momentum like you're speaking to, or conducting a commercial district needs assessment, which leads me to just another piece of advice that I would share is to conduct a proper neighborhood assessment, or commercial district needs assessment, as we call it, which can be used as a tool to gather variety of data related to small businesses in commercial districts, and ultimately allows local community organizations to identify, develop, and launch commercial revitalization projects, which are informed by local community needs and priorities.
Yeah, I mean, Riga was very thorough. The only thing that I would add is that, particularly just with my experience working with small businesses, that, the past year has been unique and it's been incredible, not just in New York, but around the country and probably around the globe. There's been all these groups like on WhatsApp channels, and I'm on these ones like Nightlife, international channels, and people have been really communicative and assisting each other and everything. And it's something that I always thought pre-pandemic should have happened. But people were so busy running their small business that sometimes being involved and engaged in these programs could be an afterthought. So one thing I would suggest as you start to set up different task force, recognize that, well, hopefully we continue to go in the right direction and the economy continues to open up and there's more vaccines, et cetera, that you find a few people who can really, as Regan was saying, be the organizer and make sure that these meetings are scheduled. And you really need people that are going to do the follow through. I think volunteer boards, especially if it's primarily small business owners, can be difficult over a longer period of time because you get caught up with just the day-to-day operations of your business. So identifying people that can really put in the time and the work and make sure that whatever happens in one meeting then has follow-up steps and assigning duties to specific people with timelines, so you're constantly moving in a forward direction. Because if not, you can end up just having these circular conversations that are really nice, but they don't actually go somewhere. And I think these are the types of issues where you just need action after action after action. And I think there's going to be communities everywhere that are going to be fighting for the same needs. And however you position yourself and the more aggressive you are and the more engaged you are, you can hopefully pull, some of those resources for your needs. But you definitely need a vision. You need a vision for what you want to see, a plan how to get there, and then the wherewithal to really keep pushing and to get it.
Yeah.
Just if I can jump in on Andrew's point, two things that came up. I think you're right. I think, and I experienced that myself, just you're running a business, especially today, it's just nonstop, So I see that as a situation where it's almost like you're hiring a CEO that reports to a board, right? Somebody who you've raised money for to give a salary to, and they're executing that, and that's their full-time job. Another thing to the communication, you mentioned these other groups that you're on, and I think we may be on some of the similar groups. One of the things I think is really special about them is there's really honest conversation. We've created a space where you can really say what it's like to run a business without any fear of anything. And so it can't be it's got to be apolitical. It's got to, so that's tricky. And that comes with culture, and it comes with somebody who can really moderate in a group that you trust to create that vision and be able to, air some of the things that anybody comes up against. So those are two things that came to mind, but I think you're right on. To take action, somebody's got to be, that's got to be their job in that organization. And they can't be split between running their own small shop right now and I think that's doable. I think that structure is definitely achievable.
If I may, Kathleen, you mentioned something I think that's really, really interesting. I think if the big companies, there's a lot of money being spent here, right? And there's a lot of corporate accounts. Where do they spend their money? They encourage their employees to go X, Y, and Z. If there was some way where that money could be directed to, businesses that have been around for a long time, and whatever that means, it doesn't have to be 30 years, doesn't have to be 10, I don't know what it is, but businesses that are in line and contributing to the community and have shown certain commitments, maybe apply to a certain program, I don't know, but something that qualifies you as a local business of the type that is worthy of protection, whatever that means. You could be brand new, but the qualifications are X. But let's say Goldman Sachs that might be paying for, I don't know how much money they might be giving their employees to spend on local food. Well, if they directed it and your local business was really busy during breakfast and lunch, maybe they wouldn't be so crazy to be open later at night because they also want to go home to their families and they don't want to be open overnight. Or maybe it would allow them to contribute other things because at least they have the cash flow and they can hire more people. My point is, it's not all about one thing, right? If there's a way where we can utilize resources that are already being spent or used somewhere and direct them to the things that matter and help kind of hold people accountable almost, right? If you're getting this, you should be doing X, right? Lawyers have to contribute 50 hours of pro bono a year. You have to do that. That's a part of the requirement. So these are things that we can tie into this that can maybe help other things by helping the business owner in one way, but requiring something else in return, and all of which makes the community better and doesn't necessarily cost anyone new money. It doesn't come from the government, although they should find a way to help both landlords, businesses, and residents. But this is one way that's already there. Paul, you mentioned it before. This money's already being diverted one way or another, right? These big tech companies that are coming in, there's a lot of good things that come, like Zoom, right? This is a way for us to communicate. But at the same time, there's this amount of money that they have behind them that makes it very hard for us small businesses to compete against. So the marketing power. So if they, on top of it, they also have the relationships with the people who spend the money at this big company and that big company and that big company. Well, in the end, it's whether it's now or in 5 years or 10 years, you're just going to see less and less and less small businesses. And you're going to see them in survival mode sooner and faster and more intensely, because that's what they are. They're in survival mode. And with that comes desperation. So that's, I think, a really good idea worth pursuing in conjunction with everyone else that you said.
Andreas, thank you. You bring up a very good point. I think we're going to hear from Anne in a second, and then John shortly thereafter. But as we're thinking about the framework and the vision of what this sort of collaborative project looks like, I want to make sure that we are, and I mentioned it earlier, being inclusive of all of the voices in the community. And I'm thinking specifically about the minority-owned businesses, the women-owned businesses, the immigrant entrepreneurs. This neighborhood is kind of known for that. And it should be going in the future. And I want to make sure that we capture that in whatever plan we have going forward. And so I actually just want to, think about how we do that and include the resident component in this as well, because Lance, as you were talking earlier, you're busy running your business, and all of you are busy running your businesses. How do we make sure we're getting through to the people whose primary focus may be running their business, not necessarily participating in a focus group or a steering committee? And so I'm curious to know, we're competing against people who are actually trying to run their businesses and do their jobs. How do we make sure we're inclusive here?
Like Anthony did a good job. He reached out to me. He left a message at the front desk to give him a call. He had something to talk about the community, and I reached out. So I think we're small enough that we can do stuff like that. I think that's the, like David was saying, Tribeca is a small community. And, I sit on my stoop. I grew up in New York. I sit on the stoop. I say good morning to everybody walking by. I'm out there, Halloween, we're giving out candy. So like, let's keep it like personal as much as we can. And I think that's what caught me. I don't normally do this, like I said. If I get an email or something, I usually, but I'm fortunate because I'm, like Anthony is a client of ours as well. So like the restaurant, we're in the people business. We talk to people, and, technology is our friend, and technology is killing a lot of us, and this pandemic expedited that what would have maybe taken 25, 50 years to get to, we're here now.
Okay.
But in what I always thought, since I've been down here, and I'm not an organizing person, but like the idea of joining together as a salon with restaurants and even maybe hotels to have people come down for a day in Tribeca, get your hair done, get a facial, get a lunch or a dinner, and somehow coordinate with each other. I don't know if it's a discount or we'll just add on something special, like, when I went into Tribeca Kitchen, Andy was send over a dessert. It was like, oh, I can't do it. He said, come on, you can. And it was just special. It just made you feel like you were in somebody's home, you're in somebody's town.
I think relationships are going to be one of the most important parts of moving this forward. And I'm going to volunteer Dean Crowell to personally go around to every business in Tribeca.
No, that's just my own thing,
No, that's important. I do want to get to Anne really quickly. She has a question, and then we may have time for one or two more just before we have to wrap up. Anne, are you available?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
You can. Oh, good. Oh, good. I'm sorry I'm not there. Unfortunately, something happened that I'm not part of your panel. However, I'm trying to deal with the immediate. I have been in Tribeca for 20 years. I have a store. It's on West Broadway and Duane Street. We have been there. We've been successful for so many years. And then 2018 and 19, we started to see something happening, not only in Tribeca, but throughout Manhattan. It was really hard for me to put my finger on what was happening. Could it just be the fact that everyone is buying online? What was it? And because I have been involved with an organization called the Tribeca Alliance, we've had several times conversation about how do we get people to come to Tribeca? How do we get people to, even the Tribecarians, we felt that they were not even coming to our store. My store is a destination. I have people from Switzerland to LA to Montreal. I mean, we have customers from all over. I have customers, of course, from all over this tri-state area as well. My business has decreased about 3/4 of what we normally do, which is making it totally impossible to whatever monies that I get from PPP, which is a pittance, to keep my few people here at the store. I think what I would like to have is someone who has the skill set on how to approach SBA or any other institution who can help us, who can support us. I want to be supported. For 20 years, I've been in this area. For 20 years, I've been a part of the community. I've fought for scaffolding. I've fought for ADA. I mean, there are so many issues that I was trying to figure out. And now the issue is small businesses. And I think we're worth it. I think we're worth saving. And I think that all of you who have incredible skill sets, which I hear, can sit down and figure out how do we help the people who are already here, who want to stay here, and help them to survive this pandemic. I mean, it really is a matter of survival. And the people that I talk to, from the balloon saloon to the toy stores, Boomerang, I talk to a lot of people, as you could imagine, and everyone is suffering and everyone could use a boost. And unfortunately, this PPP it's a Band-Aid. It doesn't help. It prolongs the agony, if anything. I mean, I've been trying to work with SBA and they are, how should I say it? I need help in how to discuss things. I'm a merchant. What I do best is sell clothing, merchandise clothing. That's what I do best. All these other things, I need people like yourselves who have different skill sets to support me. And I think, and I hope that with your help and trying to get together and figure out how can we work with the SBA? How can we find other institutions that will help us support the businesses that are already here and want to stay here? You know,
Yeah.
that's the most important.
And I greatly appreciate and empathize with the challenges. We certainly want to develop a variety of different work streams, as I said earlier, but one of the things that I view as fundamental to anything we do as a collective in this community is to find ways to provide effective technical assistance. And, you know, there are a lot of government resources and others who provide it, but I think that there's no substitute for technical assistance that understands the unique contours of the communities in which that assistance is being requested. Obviously, we request it from SBA, SBS, others, but certainly a specially fashioned or curated approach to that can be critical. I know Chris has worked on a number of these kinds of technical assistance programs previously, and we've been talking prior to this meeting about that. And certainly as a law school, thinking about ways to offer both advocacy and assistance is core to what we do. And if we don't do it from NYLS directly, we know the right places to go and the right structures to put in place. But Chris, you want to offer a little more perspective on how it's done? We're sort of where the rubber meets the road.
Sure. Thank you, Dean Crowell. Yeah. So, and I would say what you're saying, you know, we hear from a lot of businesses, and certainly initially just to acknowledge that that is what we're hearing, and to let you know that that is a critical component of this entire process. And so sort of figuring that out and making sure that we can facilitate the connections, whether it be through small business services or some sort of national organization, that is something that will come into this vision and be something that can and should be communicated out as well. Honestly, there's no perfect answer. It's you know, we're going to kind of just try and figure out how to solve a tricky situation.
And thank you and Tribeca Alliance for the work that you historically have done. And to reiterate what Dean Crowell said at the beginning, we definitely are looking to add to what has already been done. And even today, Anthony and I, spoke to several members of your board, Dimitri and David, and again, leading up to this event, we really tried to work the phones and speak to as many organizations, elected official offices, to get the buy-in and weigh-in from even the people who are not on the panel, but many of you who are in the room. And again, we want to work, with everyone, with the community at large, has been voiced. And I think, Chris, we're going to do one more quick question before rounding it up.
So I think actually we're going to wrap it up, and I'm going to turn it back to Dean Crowell in a second. But we were going to have John ask a question, and I'm just going to mention, as I can see John's question, he wanted to make sure that the senior citizens of Tribeca were included in the vision, and we want you to know that that's an important constituency, and it's actually a common thread or theme, I think, that I'm picking up here among the various constituencies, and that we need to make sure that they are included in any communications or plan or vision that comes out of this process. And I think we're building the right team to figure out how to make that happen. So thank you, John, for your question. And Dean Crowell.
And Chris, I'll add to that. As you know, I was trying to write personally to everybody who was putting questions in the Q&A in case we didn't get to them as part of the live interaction. And one of the things I saw was really a very deep commitment coming out of the community, but a concern that all constituencies be included. And I can't emphasize enough that this is about a wholly inclusive process, inclusive as to the individuals who are part of the work, those who will be benefited or affected by the work, and significantly making sure that all areas of the district are addressed. And it's Tribeca proper, of course, but also the Civic Center, which really is it's an interplay between Tribeca and the Civic Center. There's a symbiotic relationship, and one that's critically important, and we can't lose sight of that. So I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done, but I think it's going into this phase of our efforts to understand that, reflect that in choices we make about how to provide information, how to convene people, and the kinds of data collection that's necessary. And And data comes in hard numbers and also in understanding the anecdotal information that's coming out of different parts of the different neighborhoods that make up the overall community. So it's very important. So certainly as far as that, we definitely will be highly sensitive. And I appreciated Chris's emphasis that we are obviously highly sensitive to ensuring that the diversity of business owners and interests in the community is protected and reflected in future plans. Certainly, minority and women business enterprises are vital to any sustainable community. Immigrant entrepreneurs are part of that equation, part of the backbone of this city, and we can never and will never forget to ensure that that's what it means to have an inclusive and equitable process. I want to just emphasize that we will be aggressively pursuing next steps. I think that I saw such an overwhelming amount of interest from folks writing in the chat to be involved in a task force, to be involved in activities related to the task force. I would appreciate if those of you who want to be formally involved, write us directly. We've established a special email address for these efforts that will allow us to do two things. One, get your clear interest in being part of this, and two, solicit your ideas, your input, your thoughts, your concerns. All data points are critical and necessary. So write to us at, and here's the address, it's Tribeca Task Force at nyls.edu. And we will make sure that we connect with all of you. As far as the folks with whom I provided responses in the Q&A, we have everyone's name. We will be in contact with you separately as well with specific answers to questions that you may have had. But make sure that we'll make sure everyone is on whatever information that we provide about future meetings. And we want to make sure that we are as inclusive as possible. It is certainly my hope that things start to open up sooner rather than later, and the law school will make itself and its home fully open and available for future in-person meetings. But until then, we will use this Zoom channel and approach to convene everyone and to aggressively pursue our goals. So I want to thank you again for being with us. It's critically important that we do this, that we fill gaps in advocacy that are needed for us, and most importantly, that we be there for each other and make sure that we are providing the kind of support, patronizing one another's businesses, and doing what we can to promote and advocate for people to come and enjoy the benefits of what our community has to offer, and that will help us build a stronger and more sustainable neighborhood and community for a very, very long time. So thank you. Be safe, be well. We'll be back in touch very soon. Thanks again.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Best of luck to all of us.
Thank you.
to our
Thank
panelists.
you.
Thank you.
We're very grateful to our panelists. Thanks so much.